Hi everyone, welcome back to JPWHUTV in this blistering heat on the world's hottest day by the feel of it. Today's video is welcoming a very special guest. So guys, give him a big heartfelt warm welcome. We all know who he is to a degree, except we don't know who he is. But to give him a bit of context for those who aren't sure who this guy is, where have you been for the last 5-6 years? But he has he started up the West Ham Way website. He's co-creator of the West Ham Way podcast with former JPWHU TV guest Dave Walker, and also the co-creator of the West Ham Way podcast. The West Ham Way pre-match events that have been going for the last couple of years. It is ex-West Ham employee. It's not easy to say in this heat. No. Ex, how you doing, mate?
I'm all right, mate. Thank you. Thanks for such a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it.
No, you're more than welcome, mate. As I've mentioned on many occasions over the last couple of years, I don't do anything until I hear from what you're saying on Twitter. So you are 50% a co-creator of this channel as well, because like a lot of us, we all listen out for what you're saying on the radio and the tweets. Just before we go into the main conversation itself, I just need to do a quick shout out to the sponsor of the channel, 3retro.com. Please click a link in the description below that will take you directly through to the West Ham section of their website, where you can purchase retro kits from the 60s all the way through to the early 2000s, including this Boys of the 80s kit as well. There's also the 1976 home kit and also the 1980 FA Cup final kit that has inspired this coming season's shirts. I can't believe the season's only a couple of weeks away. Really looking forward to it. There's also Admiral and Umbro track jackets, polo shirts, sweatshirts, t-shirts, and other material in there as well. So go check those out. Any purchases that you make through the link, for the first 20 purchases, will be going directly through to Isla's fight to help her with her recovery. So guys, start shopping and dig deep. So basically let's start off as a very basic level for those who don't really know your background. First and foremost, how did you become a West Ham supporter?
I didn't really have much choice, to be honest with you. My dad is a big West Ham fan. His dad, my granddad, was a big West Ham fan. So naturally it kind of came in the bloodline. I was born in Leytonstone in Whips Cross Hospital, so only around the corner from West Ham as well. And just as I said, didn't really have much choice. My dad used to go when he was a little boy with my granddad, and I just followed on from him. And my dad grew up knowing quite a few West Ham people, so I was always around, people involved with West Ham. And then my granddad did all the insurance for some of the ex-players like Bobby Moore and that sort of era. He was their sort of car and their house insurer, so he got to know a few people. So West Ham has always been around me ever since I was like the minute I was born, really. So
yeah, I know the feeling, mate. I mean, with me, I'm fourth generation West Ham. My great granddad used to work for Thames Iron Works originally.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so it literally go. And also, the day that I was born was literally 3-4 hours after we won the FA Cup in 1980.
Oh, really? I was born in 1980 as well, but unfortunately, I was in my mum's stomach at the time, so I just missed out on watching it. But glad that you were. Did you say 2 hours before?
Just afterwards, my uncle and my granddad were at the game, really? and my uncle went straight to West Middlesex Hospital where I was, straight after the game. My granddad apparently turned up the next day because obviously he was out celebrating too hard by the sounds of things.
Yeah.
And he when he saw me in the cot, he said he's a West Ham supporter because I was blowing bubbles when he saw me.
Well, perfect. Yeah, you literally couldn't have been anything else, mate.
But exactly. But at the same point, I kind of think that's why we ain't done too well over the last 39 years. I think, to be honest with you, I think I've jinxed the club.
Well, that's it. I mean, since I've been alive, I haven't seen us win anything unless you include playoffs and Intertoto Cup. So, one day we'll see it, hopefully.
I really can't wait for that. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. The closest thing we've got to anything decent's been, the SBO Cup and the Betway Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. And half the time that's on penalties when we win.
Good point. Yeah. Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, can you remember what your first West Ham game was?
I can. It was I think the first home game of what must have been the 1990-91 season. It was against Portsmouth. It was 1-1. Guy Whittingham scored for them sort of early on. It was like an evening game, and then Frank McAvenny scored the equaliser for us. And then ever since that point onwards, I've been hooked. I've had a season ticket since then. Probably only missed a maximum of 10 games, I'd say, at home from that point. So yeah, so happy
10
days.
games, 10 games in what? Close to 30 years? That's not bad going,
something
mate.
like that, mate. Yeah, it must be. And the most painful one I did miss was the one when Marlon Harewood scored the winner against Arsenal, and then Pardew and Arsene Wenger had a bust up on the touchline.
Oh, yeah,
I
Jesus.
was at a wedding that I really didn't want to go to. I was forced to go to it by my wife, and we have to be careful because she's in close proximity. So I was forced by her to go to it, and then the couple that got married and made me miss that game split up within about 2 or 3 months. So I'm still livid to this day that I missed that game. So that was about one of about 10. So yeah.
Oh God! I mean, see, this is the reason why everyone goes on their holidays between the end of the beginning of June and the end of beginning of August, is because make sure you don't miss any football.
Well, exactly, mate. I'm actually missing the game against Bilbao, and even though it's a friendly, that still pains me that I'm actually away for that. But I knew that there wouldn't be any Premier League fixtures then, so I took the hit on that one. But I planned my wedding, made sure my wedding was not on a match day. Luckily I've not missed. I've had 3 children and not missed a game for any of their births as well. So they've done me well as well. But so I don't know. I find it really painful to not watch a West Ham game. Like if I've got for some reason, if I've got the ticket for it, it's just so really something I don't enjoy is missing any games. So I've tried my hardest not to.
I know what you mean, mate. I mean, I've gotten grief sometimes where I've missed a game. For example, coming up to almost 3 years ago when we played West Brom at home.
Oh yeah.
Me and my ex at the time, we were over in New York.
Okay.
I kind of thought to myself, well, a weekend in New York or watch West Brom at home.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that much of a hard decision, to be honest. But she was having a go at me because I was on my phone every couple of minutes checking what was going on. Obviously, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning at that point, but I was literally looking through every few minutes, and she wasn't best pleased with me at that point. So I know I feel your pain, mate.
Yeah,
definitely. So, out of all the games that you've been to, since going to the bowling on a regular basis, apart from obviously your first, because that's always everybody's favourite game, what is your favourite memory or your favourite game other than your first?
Oh, there's quite a few, to be honest with you, because over all those years, games that stand out to me. Obviously, everyone thinks of the last game at Upton Park. That was, you're never gonna beat the sort of a Hollywood script almost of how that day went. Other games that stand out are beating Tottenham 4-3 when Hartson and Kitson scored their first goals for us. I think beating Everton in the Cup 2-1. And on my first ever season, that was special. There's just been in the Bradford game as well, when we won 5-4 and Di Canio tried to snatch the penalty off Lampard and succeeded and then scored, thankfully. There's so many games that stand out to me. I mean, it was a magical place and a place I miss very dearly at times.
Oh, mate, I mean, as I say, for me, I agree 100% with you on that one, mate, because as I say, it was 4 generations of my family in that ground.
Yeah.
And it was like pulling teeth, trying to knowing that and funnily enough, that Man United game was on my 36th birthday as well.
Oh, really?
So that's the funny thing, that the day I was born was and obviously the last day ever at the bowling, both on my birthdays. It was you can't write that. You literally just can't. It was just absolutely perfect timing.
That's right.
And the only time I've ever been on my birthday, especially as an adult, being nervous as hell.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, with my birthday, there's never, ever, ever a West Ham game, so I've never had that privilege because my birthday's Christmas Eve. So I literally never watched West Ham on my birthday. So that's quite a good claim to fame to have those matches on yours.
Pretty much, mate. Yeah, because they are definitely ones for the history books. One agreed. I mean, the funny thing is, mate, is your birthday is on the same day that my granddad's was as well. So that's
really, and same as Dave Walker's as well.
That's right. Yeah. So we had that conversation when he was on about 5 or 6 weeks back.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't discover it for about a year or so of knowing each other, and then it was just like randomly one of us said, "Oh, my birthday in a couple of weeks," blah 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 blah, and we realised we had the same one. But unfortunately, I'm 3 years older, so yeah, he's the youngster out of the two of us.
And with the radio show that you guys do as well, he certainly sounds like the little brother, doesn't he?
He can behave like one at times as well. But the thing is, he might be the little brother in age, but he's certainly not in size. But he's almost double the size I am. So yeah, maybe mentally, but certainly not physically. That's for sure.
He's certainly one of the few West Ham supporters I've met over the years that's taller than me. That's for sure. Because I bumped into him briefly at Spurs away game last season.
Oh right, yeah.
And I know you were there as well, but I didn't get a chance to talk to you. But that was the only time I've met anyone at a football match where I had to put my head up. I was quite impressed with that.
Well, when we have people in, like recently, we've had Neil Finn to the studio. We had Jackson Ray. We've had all these people that are like 6'3", 6'4", and we go to have a photo, and it's like me with those two either side of me. It looks like they're my dads, and they've taken me out for an evening or something. So I've said we've got to make sure we get a jockey or someone like that on the show. Just there's a photo where it doesn't take a massive dip when it comes to me.
So if you have someone of pint size, shall we say, you're going to have your head buried in the shirt again. That photo cracked me up.
That's right. Yeah, I might have to do it looks a little bit like a hostage video, doesn't it? So yeah, I might have to recreate one of those again. Yeah.
All right, so that brings me on quite nicely to one of the other things I wanted to know, because I generally don't know. How did you and Dave actually become friends?
Well, just through West Ham, really. So he was obviously one half of Sex, Drugs and Carlton Cole with Kev, and I liked what they did. I thought they did some really good interviews with guests. I liked how they did it. Like, they sort of didn't have themselves in the interview, and they just sort of asked questions and cut scenes, and it was just very professional. And when I was starting up the West Ham Way website, I wanted to kind of collaborate with a lot of people. So I approached Hammer's Chat, who did collaborate with me for a little while, West Ham Fan TV, all the sort of bigger sites, just to try and do some stuff together. And we agreed to meet in the pub. We met in I think it was the Queen's. Kev, Dave and myself had a drink there, realised we got on, and then sort of things started to happen. I got approached about the podcast. I wanted them to do it with me, and then it just kind of escalated from there. And now, he's like like a brother to me. We're so close now. We speak pretty much every day, and go on holidays together. Our wives are very close. Our kids are close. So yeah, it's amazing what West Ham social media can do.
For the good things and the bad things, which we'll come on to in a few moments. But yeah, it's brilliant. I love listening to you guys on the radio, because I've been listening to the podcast since the David Gold interview.
Okay.
And what a one to listen to. That was superb. But you two, as I said to Dave when he came on, I said you two were almost like husband and wife on there. A little bit of the bickering, there's a lot of flirting going on, so it's a little worrying sometimes. But yeah,
to be honest, I think he's out of my league. To be honest, we just got very good chemistry. To be honest, whenever we're together, so that's the beauty of the podcast. Like, if you was to come for a drink, I guess with me and Dave, we would be no different to how we are on the podcast as we would be in the pub. We're just very, very similar. That's how we are with each other. Take the piss out of each other, have a good laugh. Both obviously have very similar interests and so on. So it just happened to work really, really well. And for all the negatives that social media does bring, the positives outweigh it. And obviously meeting people like Dave and Kev, definitely some of the massive positives that have come out of it.
Definitely, mate. I mean, the thing is, what I was going to say is, if you want to take your relationship to the next level with Dave, you'd have to get the yellow pages out. But that's not even as big as
Yeah.
it used to be, is it now?
Well, to be honest with you, well, we may not have to. I think if we look at our heights, it's quite. He'd be benefiting a lot more than I would. Put it that way. But yeah, let's not go there because
Yeah, let's move on for that dodgy subject for a second. So you mentioned it, and we talked about it briefly as well. How did what inspired you to do the West Ham Way website?
Well, obviously, I'd been inverted commas. I'd been ex-WHU employee for about, I think it was about 2 years or so, and I was like and I literally no one knew that I was him or it or whatever you want to call it, because I literally told no one, and I mean no one. Like my wife knew the guy who dared me to do it when I first started, and about maybe one other person. No one knew for about 2 years, because the whole thing was just literally about bringing accurate West Ham news, because I saw so many jokers making stuff up for hits and for attention, and they're still doing it now. I've
I
seen
know most of them work, not to interject, X, but most of them work for Sky Sports now, don't they? Surely.
Yeah, well, some do, but I've seen the account today, and I just think to myself, how does it happen every single summer that someone sets up these transfer rumours accounts? You can so obviously see that it's not real and that they're guessing, but they still somehow get believed. But anyway, never mind. And so I kept getting approached by other websites to write for them, and I had been writing for a few. So I've been writing for God, what was it called now? Iron Views, I think it was called. Yeah, Iron's Views with Liam Spencer, who's a top fella. I haven't spoken to him in a while actually, but he's a really nice guy. And I just wrote for them, and then they were shutting down the website and so on. And I thought, right, I can either join someone else or I can do this myself. So I thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's start the website and see what happens. And I'm glad I did. I mean, the website is hard work at times, and massive shout out to Emily who helps me run it now. But it's led to so many other things. So yeah, I'm really pleased that I did make that decision back in the day.
Because if I remember correctly, from you mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast as well, that you've been involved in West Ham media for 20 odd years, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been doing West Ham stuff for a long time. I mean, the thing is, I always done it under pseudonames. Is that the right word? Yeah. So I wrote. I believe it or not, I wrote for Knees Up Mother Brown for quite a while. They seem to hate me now, but if they only knew how many articles I'd done back in the day for them, that was one website. I used to write for a fanzine called On a Mission, and the funny thing is, I think you had to be 18 to write for On a Mission, and I kind of faked how old I was and so on. And when I was writing for them, I was like 11 or 12 at the time. And I still managed to get a few things published. And I do write occasionally for the odd newspaper, and I have been approached to do it more regularly. I mean, I might as well talk about it, but websites have offered me substantial money to write for them and newspapers, but I have turned it down because that's not what it's about. I'm not about sort of trying to make money. I could make money out of it if I wanted to, but then if I'm writing for a newspaper or a website, as somebody else, people I know straight away, people are going to start saying, "Oh, X has lost all his inside information and things like that," and it's just not why I do it either. So yeah, so that's it. At the moment, I'm writing for not many, because I don't do many articles, but the West Ham Way. I'm going to be writing for Blowing Bubbles fanzine from from August, and occasionally appearing in the odd newspaper, but that's about it really.
Mate, I don't know where you find the time. I really, really don't. For you to do your normal job, plus run your Twitter account to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I've seen you sometimes do it, and do the podcast, and then do that as well, mate. You sure you're still married?
Just about. I mean, I can see her at the moment, so she's still here. But yeah, just about. I mean, it does take its toll, to be honest with you. It's quite interesting because Nikki was on our show yesterday from West Ham Fan TV, and we were just like off air. We were having like a talk about the impact that doing this sort of stuff does have on your sort of home life and your relationship and so on. And I won't talk about his circumstances because that's up to him to talk about. But for me, like it does affect things. You know, if you take into account the events as well, like I'm there from, you know, Dave and I get there really early to set up, do the event, go to the game, don't get home till quite late in the evening. So basically don't see my family then. The podcast on a Wednesday night, because I work sort of in London and I live up at the sort of top end of Essex, I go from work rather than going home, so I don't see them then. And then if I do anything else, that's like another thing out of it. So 2 or 3 days a week is spent doing this. And as you say, the Twitter account, that's ongoing. That's like 24/7. I think people think I literally have a walkie-talkie to David Sullivan, and the minute something's happening, he's like, whoosh, whoosh, X, DX over and out, and we're doing this, blah 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 blah, and I literally tweet it, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Like literally, I have to spend ages like piecing bits together, speaking to various people, of which none of them are the Sullivans because I don't get any information from them now, and yeah, and it takes a bit of time even to get a story together. So it is very, very time consuming, you know, but I shouldn't moan because I could stop it if I wanted to. So it is within my control to stop it. So I shouldn't moan too much. But yeah, it is time consuming. That is true.
So just coming on to how everybody knows you, because there's been quite a few funny stories floating around in terms of your handle, because there was one point there was, especially after Noble's testimonial, everybody thought you were Darren Blewett.
Yeah.
for a little while, which kind of made sense up until a couple of weeks ago when he was on your radio show, and then that was completely dispelled 100%.
Yeah.
There was what else is it? Somebody said I heard someone say a little while ago that you were one of the people that used to sell the hot dogs at the stands.
Oh yeah, I get that all the time. I mean that's usually from the trolls. That one. So, like, I think my long-term troll, he of like 7 years and many dedicated accounts to trolling me, likes to call me something like ex-burger flipper or something, and then goes on about how I shouldn't leak information. So at 1 minute he's trying to discredit the information I have, and then the next minute saying I shouldn't leak it. But I think that fella's all over the place, to be honest with you. But yeah, I've been all sorts. I've been Peter Storey, the old managing director. I've been, at one point, some people thought I was Tony Cottee. Then there was a rumor that I was, who was it? Oh, it was a black player. I can't remember who it was. It was someone like Marlon Harewood or Carlton Cole. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but I used to find it funny that some people thought I was Tony Cottee and some people thought I was Marlon Harewood, and you know, just like the extremes and the differences, and you know, it's just very bizarre.
So, because obviously the handle is tongue in cheek, you've never worked for West Ham on any level at all, have you?
That's not technically true. I have indirectly. So I mean, basically, I've told people before, but back in the day, I used to manage the Redbridge district team and the Newham district team, and at one point Waltham Forest as well. So I was managing like a decent level, I guess, at youth level football, and a lot of the players, you know, particularly Newham and Waltham Forest and occasionally Redbridge, are the sort of players that, you know, West Ham, the sort of areas, that West Ham and Tottenham and Chelsea and all that scout, they used to come down and watch our games and so on. And I would always, I shouldn't really admit to this, but I don't think it's going to have too much consequences now because I don't do this anymore. But I would always, if a scout came down, if it was a West Ham scout, I would be genuine to them, and I'd say, you've got to sign this kid up here. He's like literally brilliant. Get him on. He's the best one by a mile. And often they'd take them, and then other clubs would like come in and they'd look at the same player, and I'd say, yeah, you've seen a good game today, but he's not usually that good, because I've been trying to get them to West Ham. So that became like a bit of a thing that I did for a little while, and then like the coaches at the time would like slip me a 50 quid here or there just to say thank you, and things like that. So whilst I wasn't technically, you know, on the book, so to speak, there was that, and also the name kind of takes into account who my sources are, if that makes sense. So it's not just me as ExWHU employee, like a lot of the people I speak to are ExWHU employees. So it was kind of that as well, was the thinking behind the name.
So that's okay. I take it that's where everything kind of evolved into you being a very, very reliable in the know.
Well,
You kept your network up, and then it just skyrocketed from there, I guess.
that's basically it, mate. Yeah, I mean, as you can tell from this interview and the podcast and so on, I'm just very good at talking. So I just talk and talk and talk, and then I've kept networks up. I've maintained links. You know, even from becoming inverted commas ExWHU employee, I've gained new links and new people that I know that I wouldn't have known if I didn't have the account. And it is literally a case of just talking and networking and putting things together. And to be honest, like, you know, anyone could do it. Like, I mean, it does take a tiny bit of like common sense and understanding of football and understanding of West Ham to know what is absolute rubbish and what could have some sense to it. But if you know people that know what's going on, all you've got to do is listen to them. And that's basically what it is. Listen to them, and then you do have to maintain their trust as well, because, you know, people seem to think the minute I hear something, I tweet it out like without any kind of thought for the consequences, and that is just not true at all. Like, there are stories that I could put out there that would get me huge amounts of hits, huge amounts of, like, I don't know what you want to call it, attention or whatever people think I do it for, but I choose not to put those stories out because I don't see the benefit of it, and I don't. It will just be a negative thing for West Ham. And alternatively, sometimes I contact people in the club, in the media team, like I'm going out for a drink with someone quite high in the media team in a couple of weeks, and occasionally I just say to them, look, right, this is what's going to break in the papers. It's a really bad story. Here's the heads up, etc., etc. And it's about building trust. You know, some people will message me and they'll say, right, I'm letting you know, but just don't tell anyone. Can you find out if this is true? And, you know, it's all like that, really. It's just like, I guess, journalism in a way, but just one club specific.
Yeah, I know what you mean, mate. I mean, the Ben Davis in the chat, guys, it's great to see that everybody's talking. He's asked quite a poignant question to where we're at the moment. So, how do you manage to avoid people finding out who you are? I mean, because obviously being, because if I remember correctly, you continue being on a season ticket holder at the London Stadium, so people are obviously going to recognise your voice. How do you still maintain that level of anonymity?
Well, that's a good question. To be honest with you, the thing is, even if people find out who I am, right? So let's say I put a picture out of me and I'm at the events, you know, I'm always at all the events. People can talk to me because, as you say, my voice gives me away and I'm the person that does all the tickets. So the minute someone speaks to me, they can usually tell. Often when I'm walking to the ground, people will recognize my voice if I talk to someone. And I get a lot of people come up to me now. I think, firstly, I've got these, I guess, people, they're people I can trust and respect, and they're not going to put something out about me. And also, even if it did come out that that this was me and my picture was out there, I'm not the person getting the information. As I always try to explain to people, I'm just a fat lad with a Twitter account that happens to know people. If you find out who I am and you see that I'm that fat lad, that doesn't tell you where the information comes from. That doesn't tell you, you know, who said what or anything. It just shows you the person that's got the Twitter account. It's not even that relevant. The only reason that I stay anonymous now, really, because all my sources pretty much know who I am and stuff. The only reason I stay anonymous is because of the trolls and the hate that is out there. And, you know, I'm starting to take my eldest child to games now, and I don't want her to have any consequence of being my child, you know. And the minute, you know, I'd like to think when I was like 18, 19, I might have been relatively attractive, but now I know my looks have deteriorated hugely, and I know the minute someone gets a picture of me, I'll be like, oh, he's a fat this, he's a bald this, he's a short this, and there's just such nastiness on Twitter, and I just don't need that. And it's not good for anyone to have that sort of comments made about you, and so it's mainly that reason that I don't do it, but that I don't reveal who I am, or I choose to try and stay anonymous. That's the main reason, and also because I don't really like the attention of it. You know, like when I'm going to the games and stuff, I don't mind people coming and chatting to me. That's fine, but I wouldn't. You know, I wouldn't stand on a box shouting, "I'm XWHU employee, come and chat to me," because I'm just not that sort of person. You know, I'm just much more, I don't know, reserved, I guess. I don't really like the attention of it. So that's the main reason. And, you know, people do know who I am. Everyone in the club knows who I am now. They've got, as the listeners said, they've got my address, they've got my name. They can tell who I am just from, like, you know, transactions I make or photos of me in the ground. And yeah, everyone knows who I am now, but I don't technically, despite what people think, do anything wrong. So it doesn't really matter too much.
Well, if the club did release it, it's a breach of the Data Protection Act.
Well, exactly, mate. That's the thing, exactly. And this is the thing. Like, if I've said to the club so many times, believe me, I've said to the club, if you want me to stop or if you don't agree with something, tell me and I'll change. I've said it countless amount of times because I'm a fan and that's what I consider myself. I'm just a fan that happens to know a few people of the club he supports. And I would, if I thought I was being a massive detriment to the team or to anything, then I would stop. I would. But I don't. And I think a lot of people in the club don't. Probably some don't like it, but on the whole, they're okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, mate, I mean, that's obviously one of the things that I noticed. What was it last year? You went off Twitter for a little while because people were just getting on top of you. Whereas now,
Yeah.
when you get pretty much the same, I can't say the same people, but the same types of tweets, you actually turn it around and lash it back at them to a degree, which I absolutely love about that, because that's when I know when you said you were leaving Twitter, I was tweeting you a lot saying come back, we need, don't go anywhere, it's their problem, it's not yours. And there's a lot of people out there that are very happy that you're back, because I wanted to say to you, I'll say face to face, but I just wanted to say that I'm as someone who suffers with social anxiety and I can get wound up very, very easily, the same way that you used to.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of helped me in that same regards at the same point. So whereas my temper is a lot lower than it used to be from those sort of people. And Gazer in the chat is again asked a very, very poignant question. Says, X, how do you deal with the negativity thrown at you?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate very much what you said there. I mean, some of the things, there've been a lot of positives that come out of what I've done. When you say things like that, that means a lot to me. All the charity stuff that I've been able to do over the years, the people I've got to know. So there are lots of positives, and I don't want to sit here being Mr. Negative about it because I could stop it. But you're right. It is very. I'm not the most. What's the word? Mentally secure person myself. I've suffered throughout my life with, I guess, anxiety. I wouldn't say depression because that seems a little bit strong, but certainly borderline at times, like most people have. And it is really hard at times to come onto social media and just see so much. Are we allowed to swear on your show?
Mate, 100%. But we've had Dave Walker on here. Of course we can swear.
Of course, yeah. Sorry, that's a stupid question. Yeah. So the amount of shit that I get seen about me on Twitter and on forums, the things that wind me up the most are the things that are just not true. Like, I can take people saying that, maybe I shouldn't leak this or I shouldn't do that, or maybe not agreeing with what I do. But when people turn around and say, oh, he's, I don't know, Sullivan's lapdog, or he gets paid to do this, or and I know that I'm turning down money to do this, and people say I'm not, and I'm being paid for it. It can really, really get to you, and it is really frustrating. Every day, and that's not an exaggeration, every day I read something about myself, and I if I wanted to, and I used to do this, you can search forums, the internet, Twitter, with your name, and you can find something negative about you every single day. And I used to do that, and the forums would be full of it. Sometimes the forums would even have headings XWHU employee, and it would literally be pages and pages and pages of abuse. And it is tough, honestly. It really is at times. I think, why do I do this? Why do people say this about me, etc.? But I've just learned as over the years, and I have been doing this 7 or 8 years now, just to kind of think that the positives far outweigh the negatives. If you think of the amount of followers I've got to the amount of abuse I get, it's much more in favour to the followers and stuff. And I almost have managed to turn it around now, where I feel sorry for the people that are the ones sending me the abuse, because I think if you've had to go onto a forum, so you've had to log, you've got angry, you've logged onto a forum, you've put in your username and so on, blah 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 blah, your password, you've written a comment about someone, a whole paragraph of something which isn't even true, but it makes you feel good to write that about someone in a negative way, then there's got to be something not quite right with you, is my opinion. You know, that you're either a very angry person or you're lacking something. And I've managed to turn it around to the point now I actually feel sorry for these people rather than, like, I don't know, anger or whatever I used to feel in the past.
Yeah, I mean, to quote what you used to say, and every now and again still do, angry, upset teenagers that are running those accounts.
A lot of them are, mate. Yeah, a lot of them
exactly. Are. I mean, I've had it not to the degree of you, because my audience is nowhere near as large as yours, but there were, you know, I've had people take the piss out of my stammer.
There you go.
Which I really just ignore. I just turn it back on them. And also, there's one person a few months ago told me I was too old for YouTube. If you're watching, yeah, I mean, but not to blow smoke up your ass here, mate. But you know, we've got there's people in the live chat now saying the same thing that I've basically said, is like, don't. Sebastian is saying, don't stop X, we live for you. And also DJ Blokey, fair play X, good to hear your honesty.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, I'm happy and I'm glad. I like doing these kind of shows where people like yourself ask me these things, because I'd like to think I am an honest person. You know, I know it seems like I'm not, because I kind of hide behind an anonymous account, but I'd like to think in person I am an honest person. Look, also, I understand why people get annoyed when I do the eyes, the thumb, and the crossed irons, and I get something right and show the pictures of it, and I can understand why that will get me abuse. And yesterday, for doing it about Obiang, I had loads of abuse about doing that. But the reason I do that is also almost because it's like tradition, but also to show all those people that every single summer say he knows nothing, he's a fraud, he's guessing, blah 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 blah. I do it just to say, look, you keep saying that, but I keep telling you the news and it keeps being right. And I think a lot that I've got two sort of groups of people that dislike me, possibly three. So one of them is the sort of the young teenagers that are kind of trying to impress their mates. You know, you said you get stuff about your stammer, the amount of stuff I get about my voice, and that is medically related as well, which makes it sort of harder to take at times. But I get loads about that, and that. So yeah, that they're the sort of the youngsters that like are looking to kind of impress their mates and, you know, make out I'm a fraud, and then they all laugh and they all get retweets. So I've got that lot. I've got the kind of old school lot that don't really understand, I guess, social media, or social media wasn't around so much when they were fans. So they're kind of like, they don't like this whole news being out on Twitter, but they don't seem to understand this is just what modern football is now. You know, social media dominates modern football, and it's not just West Ham, it's all clubs. You just know it about it for West Ham because you support West Ham. And then I've got maybe the last type of people who are just like, I don't know, I just think very, very angry people. You just have to look on their Twitter feed, and like literally everything they say to anyone is something negative. And that's the kind of three sort of groups of people I tend to have the hate from. But like I say, most of the time, everything is, you know, lots of it is very, very positive. And I think dealing with the criticism and the hate at times has made me better in my kind of profession away from Twitter. You know, I don't get so upset by people saying things about me now because I'm kind of used to it. So
Yeah, you do. That's one of the things that I said to a work colleague of mine. We'll move on because there's still quite a lot to talk about. We've been going for half an hour and only gone about a third of the way through, which is exactly what happened with Dave as well, for that matter.
Imagine what it's like when me and him go out for dinner or something.
The restaurant must ask you to leave because they're closing up.
They do. It's so funny, actually. Yesterday, we had a meeting. We did the podcast, and there's this literally, I'll give it a plug. I'm not being paid for this plug, but I will give it a plug anyway. There's this buffet in Brentwood, which is like an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet, and both Dave and I have we're curvy, shall we say, in the stomach department, and we like our Chinese. So we went for a meeting quickly after, and then we went there, and literally they were like sweeping round us, turning the lights off, coughing, hinting, opening the doors, and that's the third week in a row they've done that now. So yeah, and as we were leaving, the lady said, "You guys should really get here earlier." So yeah, so literally, it's funny you should say that, but anyway, sorry.
Now, obviously, let's just, because you and I could talk about that for ages. I hate social media as well as you do, but it's the ironic thing. We need it to fuel our passion. That's the funny thing about it. But obviously, just one of the things I want to say is get from your point of view now, mate. What's over the last, as we're coming into the third season at the London Stadium now, what is your favourite standout moment so far?
I think when we stopped Tottenham winning back a couple of years ago when we beat them 1-0, wasn't it? I think it was Lanzini.
Right,
yeah, that was a special moment. I think there's been some good games this season. Obviously beating Arsenal, Declan Rice scoring that goal, that was a special moment. Beating Manchester United was good. There's been quite a few. The Huddersfield game, in terms of, whilst I don't think we should have been 3-0 down or whatever it was to Huddersfield, the fact that we came back and won 4-3 was quite dramatic. So there's been some good moments. I mean, it's going to take a long, long time before I'd ever say that I don't miss Upton Park. But as the years go by, we are starting to get some good memories at the new stadium. Yeah,
agreed, mate. Though I can't see anything that is going to, even on my dying day, I don't think we'll ever get the London Stadium as rocking and as in what's the word? Not, I was going to say intense, but it's not. It wasn't really intense. I mean, it was at certain points, but it's not. It's never going to be as personal to us because we've always got that link to that stadium. Younger generations coming through, as you and Dave talked about last summer, if I remember correctly, are going to see the London Stadium in the same way that you and I and 50,000 other people see the bowling, and it's fair enough, because that's what, because the bowling was all we knew and up until recently, and then the kids coming through now, all they know is the London Stadium. So it's it's roundabouts really.
Like my daughter, my eldest, went to Upton Park once, and that was when she was like 3 or 4. Can barely remember it, I think. And my 2 other kids, they were, well, my middle one never went, and my youngest wasn't alive when when we played there. So they're not going to have those memories, like you say. And as the years go by, as sad as it is, Upton Park will not be as memorable to West Ham fans as generations come and younger generations. You're right, it will change, but it will take, I guess, our generation and the ones sort of slightly below and slightly above us. It will take a long, long time before we can fully, I think, see it as our home.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I guess you probably won't be that far off agreeing with me as well, mate. It's just that we missed that level of intimacy that we had at the ground. It wasn't. To a degree, it had something to do with being very, very close to the pitch anyway. But it's just that it was more of a feeling of being there, like being at a rock concert, or it's all there for the same purpose. Whereas now, with the London Stadium, even though I remember seeing quite a lot of actual tourists at the ground. Everybody seemed to, when they were in the ground, because it was so closely packed, everybody would start. I mean, I remember speaking to a few Americans that had come over for a holiday and all that sort of stuff. Whereas now at the London Stadium, like for example, all right, yeah, the Maxfield Town game last season, when we beat them 8-0.
Yeah.
Not exactly the sort of game that most people would stick around for, because unless you've got diehard connections to the club. But there was a couple in front of us that were taking selfies with the pitch in the background. Went to half time and we never saw them again.
Yeah.
And as good as that is, it's also a very big detriment to the atmosphere as well, for that matter. But like you said earlier about when we've beaten Spurs at home, when we beat Man United with that Anderson goal, I've never heard the London Stadium like it.
No, and I think on its day it is an amazing atmosphere. It really, really is. Business. We haven't got any real memories as such from that stadium. We're beginning to get them, but if we could go and say, I know a cup run this year, we could beat. Let's just say we beat Chelsea in the quarterfinals at the London Stadium. Those sorts of things that need to happen. Last year felt like it was the best year in the stadium, and I think that was a couple of reasons. I think firstly, we played better. I mean, that's a big factor. I think we played better football as well, which is also a factor. I think people are beginning to get familiar with where they're sitting now, if that makes sense. So the first season, everyone was all over the place. It was, but people are getting used to which stand they want to be in. I think naming the stand I'm in, the Billy Bond stand, will help. I think that gives it a bit more of like a West Ham personal touch to it. And I just think over the years, it will start to feel more like ours. But the main problem that is always going to exist is that, like you've said, is the distance from the pitch. They've talked about squaring it off, but realistically, when that will happen, I can't see it happening within the next 5 years. That's for sure.
I agree, mate, 100%. Paul in the chat earlier asked quite a relevant question to the conversation now, which is why I've not asked it yet. Said, do you find that the negativity / positivity follows the way of the team's results?
What, in terms of the way they are to West Ham, or how they are to me, or just both?
Pretty much to both, in terms of the fact that where people are tweeting you about stuff, and how people are in Twitter or Facebook in general. Like for example, there's more people come out of the woodwork when teams lose, and then this all seems to die down when we're beating teams properly. I mean, do you correlate with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the thing is, like, take Sebastian Haller, right? When I'd like to think that was a good story of mine in terms of it reporting. I mentioned interested in him in like April, May time, and then kind of followed it through. And then when it was actually officially announced, it was like, I got loads of tweets that day, like saying how, well I'd done reporting it, what a great signing it was, how wonderful it is, we love West Ham, blah, blah, blah. Very, very positive stuff. If he got to the club, like which has happened with transfers before, he's sitting there. I've reported it like 100% accurate to the fact he's sitting at West Ham, and for whatever reason, he turns around and doesn't want to join, or he breaks his toe in the medical or whatever, and he hadn't joined, I would have got tons of abuse, and it is such it really is on a knife edge. A lot of what I say, it can change. Take Marcus Brown. Since I've been on the call to you, I haven't checked Twitter. For all I know, having said he's joined Middlesbrough, for all I know, he could have got up there now, done the medical, failed it, and not joined Middlesbrough, or another club could have came in and put a last-minute offer in, and he's gone there. And I look like I get so much abuse if something like that happens. But it's like almost impossible to live your life and be on top of West Ham news to the hour, because like I said, I've been on the phone to you now for however long it is. I haven't checked my phone once. Anything could have happened in that hour, and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely results based. Dave and I often say we would have loved to have done the podcast in the last season at Upton Park. It would have been amazing to be able to report on those results and that feeling. But we started it, I think, the first season at the London Stadium. So we were talking about, put the stadium being poor, the manager not doing very well, rubbish signings, blah, blah. Then we had to deal with the march and all that stuff. And so, yeah, it is such a results-based thing, because when West Ham are playing well, Twitter feels nice and social media feels good. But when they're playing poorly, then it feels terrible. And I think that's like the bigger picture with West Ham. I don't support another club, so I can't compare us to other teams. But my gut feeling is that we are quite a reactional bunch. 1 minute we're going to be challenging the Champions League. When we signed Sebastian Haller, everyone was doing Champions League music and things like that, saying we're going to get there. And then we try and sign Gary Medell or whatever, who people seem to not rate, and it's all of a sudden, we're terrible, what's happening? And there is such a thin line between positivity and negativity, definitely.
I mean, just talking about those two players you talked about, Marcus Brown.
Yeah.
As I said to you before we went live, I'm not going to ask you any ITK questions, but this is apart from two, and this is one of them.
Okay.
How long was this actually in the background for? Because I know a few people have been saying about that in the chat as well.
How long the transfer been going to Middlesbrough? Well, basically, he went to Oxford on Tuesday. So I even said this is how quickly things happen. I even said on the podcast yesterday that he's going to leave West Ham. It's probably going to be to Oxford. And then what happened was that Middlesbrough obviously heard the deal. They had been looking at Diangana anyway, so they were kind of looking for like an attacking player. They've also had a bit of a history with signing players from us like Hugo and Fletcher and Randolph. So there's like a strong kind of link with them, and they kind of came in last minute, offered him the deal. It was accepted today. I was told by two people, and that's another thing that people won't know about me. I will never tweet anything unless at least two reliable people say it to me. So I got you
normally do 3 checks, don't you, if I remember correctly?
3 checks is what I feel most comfortable with. So I got my first tweet it was probably about 1 o'clock. It was, because it was when I was literally going to the swimming pool with the kids. So it was about 1 o'clock. And then I texted a few people. I got my other one about 2 o'clock, and I was like, it's happening really quickly. Do I take the risk of going for a third, or do I just put it out there? So I put it out there that he's going there. But he'd been told basically before they went to China, that when they were in where were they before? Switzerland. When they were there, Pellegrini sat down with all of those kind of fringe players. So Josh Cullen, Nathan Holland, Marcus Brown, Jordan Hugill, Reece Oxford, those sorts of players. And Diangana, they basically said to him, right, this is where you sit. This is what I think is going to happen for you. It's up to you what you do. And Marcus Brown was told that he had no real future. Now, I've seen a lot of people quite negative about his sale. Now, I think he's quite a decent player. However, you do have to take into mind, and I feel bad saying this because I've met Marcus Brown. He's a decent fella. He is quite a talented kid, but he was on loan to Oxford last year, and yes, he played well for Oxford, and he was one of their better players. But we're talking like League One here, and he's like 21, 22. I genuinely think he needs to have proved it in the Championship by now, at least, for him to then be considered Premier League standard. And I just think, unfortunately, he hasn't done that yet. He's had quite a few loans, and they've done all right, but not set the world alight. And so I think probably a move to Middlesbrough with a percentage of any future deals put into the deal isn't necessarily a bad thing for us. It's a low transfer fee. That's the only thing.
Well, very, very low. I wasn't expecting it to be the 300,000.
Well, that's what I was told. Now, obviously, I don't know for certain if that figure's concrete, but that came from a couple of people. Now, the problem with him is that If Oxford United were the only club interested in him, I don't know much about Oxford United, but I can't imagine that their budget would stretch beyond about 300 to 500,000. And unfortunately, until Middlesbrough came in for him, they were the only clubs that were showing interest. So when the club want to reduce their wage bill, which they have done significantly this summer, and I guess he wasn't on a huge wage, but he was one of the better paid academy players that wasn't playing, if that makes sense. So
about 20, was it about 25 grand a week, something like that?
No, he's not on that much. He's on less than that, but he's on a decent whack, but yeah, not that much. But anyway, we've got him off the wage bill now, and I don't know where our money's gone. I think we should be spending more money this window. I'm not defending the board at all. I think we should have spent more money than we have. However, the board did state, and I stated many a times, that the budget this window was 30 million plus future sales and wages being reduced. Now we've reduced the wages significantly with him going and Obiang going, and probably Hugo, possibly Oxford. Possibly, who's the other? There's another fringe player that I'm probably forgetting that could go. But anyway, there's about 2 or 3 players. We now will hopefully buy another forward and another midfielder. So it's good to, we need to get players out quite quickly as well, because the deadline for transfers is the 10th of something like that, the 10th of August. So there's not that many weeks left.
It's not even that, mate. What is it? It's the 8th of the 8th.
Is it the 8th?
It's 2 weeks. 2 weeks today, in fact.
There you go.
I'm glad you brought up the availability of cash, mate, because I've been doing I got a bit of stick from the tweet that you put out about it was like Obiang, and I tweeted it, and I got into a massive, I wouldn't say an argument, because they were the 2 people that were having a go at me were quite immature for it, but
surprise.
but basically, like you said, it was well documented that towards the end of last season, the budget was going to be 25 to 30 million, right?
Yeah.
So leaving that in, right? We've had 39 million sold and spent 69 million. So that, and plus obviously with Obiang as well. Yes, we had 69 million in the budget, and we've spent 57.2 million. Not knowing, obviously it's not been confirmed what the agency fees were, Roberto and Alan, but I'm guessing probably a couple of million each. So we've got about 10 million from what I'm understanding, plus obviously the money for Obiang as well. So probably looking around about 17-18 million. Yet David Sullivan seems, from what's coming up on Claret and Hugh the last couple of days, and more specifically the boasting about the saved 18 million on wages. Let's talk about Hernandez. Could be the other one that's going off. Surely that's suicide if we haven't got a striker target.
Yeah, I think Hernandez has started to make us. I said this yesterday on the show, make voices that he would like to still be considered for a move, but unless we have at least 2 other forwards that are going to come in, they won't allow him to go. Pellegrini won't allow him. He gave him the number 9 shirt and told him he was going to be important this year. And I don't think they'll get rid of him unless a substantial offer comes in, because there's only 1 year left on his contract, and obviously he's our highest paid player now as well, now that announcement has gone. So he, I think we would consider it, but only if there was at least 2 players lined up to come in. And I think that's the thing. We will sign a couple more players, but they won't be 45 million like Allaire was. I think they'll be, I guess, round about the sort of 10 million or below figure, and possibly a loan or a free transfer as well.
Which wouldn't surprise me, because there are some so-called bargains out there that I've seen recently. But going because you touched on it very, very briefly just there, Rex, mate. Because obviously this window is to reinforce the starting 11 rather than the actual squad itself. What positions do you think we need to try and get in the next couple of weeks?
We really need another forward. I'm really paranoid about the forward situation, because, as I said, I've been a West Ham fan a long time. I can just see Allaire I hate to say it, but like, you know, do his hamstring in the first game or something like that, and then we're left with Hernandez or Antonio or Silva if he gets fit as our only forward options at this point, and it's just not good enough. Hernandez has proven since he's been there that he's very inconsistent and probably not suited to any style that we play. I don't think Antonio is a forward. I think he's all right to play the odd game there, but not to base your season round. Silva, who knows when he's going to be fit. So I don't think we can risk not having another forward. So we have to get at least one forward. And I think we need another midfielder as well, another central midfielder, possibly like a box-to-box midfielder, because Wilshere, you know, how long he's going to last, I don't know. Lanzini, another one, question marks over his fitness. Declan Rice, of course, phenomenal, but we've got to be careful not burning him out because you know, there's a lot of pressure on the very young shoulders still. Noble is getting older, you know, so I just think we need that extra legs in there as well, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, mate. There's, for me personally, I know that I mean, I understand that one of the reasons for Gary Medel is because obviously he can play at right back. I don't know if that's an Antonio right back or an actual right back, but
yeah.
for me, it's the two wing back positions definitely. One more defender, because as much as I love Winston, I don't think we can rely on him as a number two backup for our centre backs. And agreed, the same point. At least one, or for me personally, it's two strikers, because you're right. Anything could happen to Hernandez. Anything can happen to Haller, especially it being his first season in the as well. So you know we need a good couple of options from that side of things. But just to change the subject, really, just going back to the podcast and the pre-show events, who has been your favourite guest that you've spoken to?
Wow, that is a really hard question.
Don't worry, they won't be watching, so you can be honest.
I mean, in terms of honour, having Trevor Brooking as our first ever guest and our 100th guest on the podcast, like my dad made me watch videos of Trevor Brooking so much when I was a kid, always told me what an amazing player he was. So to then interview him as our first ever interview, that will take some beating. Julian Dix is another. We've had him on the podcast twice and at the events once. Again, he was an absolute hero of mine growing up. I used to have Dix on the back of my shirt, get a lot of Mickey taken out of me at school for having that name on the back of my shirt, but I did. So having him was great. But it's really hard to call because there's been so many interesting and fascinating ones. I mean, people like Kenny Brown Jr. is an absolute legend, such a nice guy. Jimmy Walker, hilarious. Martin Allen is another very funny bloke. Carlton Cole was brilliant. And I just, it's so hard to actually name one person. Alvin Martin is another. I don't think we've ever had a guest or that I've not particularly liked. There's maybe one or two where Dave and I afterwards have said, yeah, I'm not too keen on him, but majority, like 98% of the people have been absolute legends.
So if you could have anybody, your dream guest, who would it be?
Well, it's got to be DiCanio, 100%. I've never met him. And I think to myself, of all the people I've met Jeff Hurst, I've met Martin Peters, Trevor Brooking, Billy Bonds, Harry Redknapp. He was another great one. I've met all these people, but I've never met or had anything to do with Paolo Di Canio. I've got his number. I've WhatsApped him a couple of times to try and get him on the show, but he never responds or anything. So yeah,
you're not actually pressed that call button yet.
No, Dave did. Dave tends to do the calls because he works from home, so he has a bit more time than me. So Dave gave him a call, but he never got back to him either. So but he'd be the ultimate. But as I said, I feel like I've missed other people out. Matthew Etherington is someone I'm very fond of. Hayden Mullins was great. James Collins, like literally every single person, pretty much bar two, has been amazing. But yeah, DiCanio is the one I would ultimately want to get.
Okay, well, I'm not going to get you to name and shame who the other two are, so that's fine. Now, obviously, because we'll come to the Brighton away fixture in a minute. But have you got any? Well, you don't have to say who the guests are, but are there any confirmed pre-events that are definitely going to happen for the start of next season?
Well, we're not doing one for the Man City game because the kickoff's 12:30, isn't it? So we'd have to do the event from 8:30 to 11:30, and it's just too much. And I'm actually on holiday then, so I'm actually going to get the train back just for the game. But we've got Hayden Mullins, hopefully, for the Norwich game.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty much confirmed. I mean, we're just waiting. He's just waiting on his academy because he's the Watford academy manager, I think. So he's just waiting for those fixtures to be confirmed. We'll definitely get Jimmy Walker because people have seen now on the podcast how funny he is. We've got a number of top names lined up. I mean, the difficult thing we've got is that we don't ever want to repeat guests. And, you know, the more you do this, the harder it is to find new guests, particularly when modern era has been a lot of foreign players. So the foreign players tend to go back to the country that they're from. So it's even harder to get them to do events. But we have got some big names lined up. But one thing I would stress to West Ham fans is when they come to our events, Dave and we do get frustrated when we have a big name. So when we have like, you know, Julian Dix or Carlton Cole or, I don't know, Dean Ashton, someone like that, it sells out. It sells out instantly, like really, really quickly. When we have a lesser big name, so I hate to name them, but I will name them, but someone like Kenny Brown or even Jimmy Walker or someone like that, that's perhaps not to the same legendary status, that they don't sell out as much, but they are arguably the best events because they are the stories that people haven't heard. They're less afraid to be like controversial because they've got less to lose. You know, they've got better stories in some ways. And, you know, some of the best interviews I've ever done, I think, when we interviewed Darren Blewett, we've interviewed him twice, and Neil Finn, you know, two people that played for West Ham but never quite made it, and it's really interesting to hear their story. As I said, Jimmy Walker is hilarious. Kenny Brown is a lovely fella. Martin Allen, hilarious. No one should write any guest off, is my advice, because arguably the lesser known ones are the more entertaining ones.
I know, mate, but because that was something that Dave said on when he was talking to American Hammers, is that, you know, he can't get that you guys don't book the, like you say, the lesser known players but for me personally, I wouldn't care, you know, if we had bloody Shaka Hislop down at the O'Neill's in Leytonstone. Quick plug for the pub where the events are, guys. That used to be my old drinking hole when I lived in Leytonstone. Not that long ago, so it's a really nice pub. Just check it out anyway, guys, if you're in the area. But yeah, I mean, I've not been able to come to your events, mate. But this coming season, I definitely want to try and do at least a couple because I'm really missed out. I wanted to go to the Ginger Collins one, and I just wasn't in time, unfortunately. Yeah. But for me, I want to hear everybody's story. I don't care if you brought somebody in that was made 7 or 8 appearances. If they've got stories to tell, then, you know, people, you know, I don't want to say true fans because it doesn't make you a fan any less or more if you don't want to hear from them or not. But you want to know the behind the scenes and stuff. Like, for example, what Jimmy Walker said about the 2 promotion pushes that he was under in the FA Cup final. There's some brilliant stories. Yeah, absolutely superb. And I'm sure that other people like Darren Blewett, as you said, and I don't know, you know, maybe sometime if Brahmi was able to get out of the shower for more than 5 minutes and come on to talk to you guys, he might have some decent stories for that season he was with us. I mean, that's what we want to know. That's what we you know, it's nice as it is to see what's going on the pitch. We want to find out stuff what's going behind the pitch. Like, you know, for example, how everybody was. Jimmy Walker explained perfectly well how everybody was feeling at the FA Cup final.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing, mate. And like also as well, like obviously we all got our heroes, you know, Di Canio, whatever. In some ways, it's more interesting hearing what he was like from someone else, if that makes sense. So, you know, like if you was to take, let's think of that 2002 year when we went down. I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone that was kind of on the fringes. Even someone, right? This is a random name that's just come into my head. Someone like Lauren Courtois. Right?
Oh Jesus! Yeah, that is random.
I mean, how many times did he play for West Ham? Probably like 3 or 4 times, right? I can't really remember, but I seem to remember him playing against Newcastle, and I thought he was quite decent, and then he never really played again. But he would have been that year under Roda. He'd have played with Di Canio and Joe Cole and Michael Carrick and all of those lot. Even hearing as a I guess a foreigner that came to the team and didn't quite make it, hearing his side of the story, what was it like to be with these players? Why didn't he make it at West Ham? Why did we get relegated that season? Just hearing his story would be as interesting as hearing from the Di Canio himself, I guess, as much as I want Di Canio to be there. But do you know what I mean? It's like everyone's got a story to tell, and you can't grade how good a story is going to be on the person and how many games they've played for West Ham. That's my opinion. We've had some absolute legends there. We've had Alvin Martin, Phil Parks, we've had McAvenny, we've had David Cross, people like that. And, some of those haven't sold out because people haven't seen them play. But I love hearing about the history of my club. I as I said, I first went in 1990, so I never saw Brooklyn play or Moore or Peters or Hurst or any of those people. But I like hearing about how good they were, and I like the fact that I think my history knowledge of West Ham is quite solid.
Yeah, and mate, when you had Hayden Mullins on a couple of weeks ago, he was one of my favourite players of that awful.
Yeah.
But, because there's just something about his play that I just kind of, to a degree, very similar to oh god, what's his name now? I'll come back to him. But I just loved watching the bloke. Really love it. Very, for me personally, very underrated player.
Yeah.
Just to talk about, because obviously the first pre-match event you guys are holding is the Brighton away fixture in Vegas.
Yes,
that sounds absolutely brilliant, and it kind of comes around to what John Black is saying in the group chat when I was in the live chat when I was saying about dream guest, because he's saying that Lena the Polish princess is his dream guest. So she's going to it, isn't she? She's going to the event.
She is, yeah, she is going. I mean, that's it's not a sort of type of guest we've ever really tried to attract before, but we don't want to discriminate, of course. So yeah,
I mean, I bet she's got some fantastic stories about, because obviously she's Polish and she's a West Ham supporter. I bet she's got some great stories.
Yeah, she probably has got some great stories, definitely. I mean, to be fair to Lena, I've got to know her quite a lot over the last year or so. I've obviously never met her, but speaking on Twitter, she actually knows a phenomenal amount about West Ham. She's not just, I don't know, using it as a promotion thing. She is a real proper West Ham fan. She has a very good knowledge of things. Sometimes she DMs me stuff, and I just think, yeah, that is actually spot on. I agree, really good in-depth analysis. And I think people should, obviously it is hard to look beyond what she does as her chosen career, but as a West Ham fan, she is a proper West Ham fan, and I think her opinion is valid as much as anyone's. But we're trying to get Jonathan Spector to that event. Actually, I've been speaking to him quite a bit on the phone and stuff to get him, and he's without a club at the moment, so he's getting back to me because he can't commit yet till he knows exactly what he's doing. But obviously as an American West Ham player, if we can pull that off, that should be quite an interesting guest to have. But yeah, really excited. When I get off doing this with you, we've got a conversation between Dave and John Black and I about how we're gonna sort of go about sorting it all. But yeah, it's gonna be an amazing thing. I can't wait to meet the American Hammers out there and other people, and yeah, it should be a really good experience.
Yeah, subtle hint taken, mate. We'll wrap this up relatively soon.
No, I actually didn't
but talking to John Black, he said Repka would be interesting.
Oh, I'd love to get Repka. That would be a great guest. I think he would have some phenomenal stories. I'd love to get him. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wait till
It's
he's
quite a
released.
fair bit, if I remember correctly, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Until he's released, but I mean, we've got some good guests lined up. I mean, I can name some of them, and hopefully, if I name them, that might actually put the pressure on them to confirm. But we've been speaking to like Kevin Nolan. He's up for doing one, so I think he'll be a really good person to have. We've been speaking to Billy Bonds. He's been a bit trickier to try and nail down and so on.
He's a very humble man, isn't he? He's very not introvert. So it's probably been a little bit too generous. He doesn't like public attention that much, does he? So,
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and Trevor Brookings said he'll do one. Harry Redknapp said he'll do one. So there's quite a few that we've kind of got in the pipeline, and we may have to revisit some of guests of old because when we did the Machiavelli one, he was our first guest. And I think Alvin Martin was our third guest, and they weren't massively attended because I mean they sold quite well, but it was before we'd really got the momentum going. So it'd be good for some of the new people to see them. And I think so like Matthew Everington, getting him back again because he's got some really good stories to tell, and Matt is a really lovely bloke as well, so he'd be a good one. And yeah, there's quite a few that we're talking to. So yeah,
and John Black is saying that Simon Livet will be there as well.
He will. It was so funny when John said that to me, actually, because my first ever West Ham poster on the wall that I can remember having up was the team photo. And no disrespect to Simon Livet, but he was the one person on there that my friends would always come around and go, "And who's that?" like that, because he never played for West Ham. Well, I think he might have played like once or twice. He was like on the fringes of the squad, but he never quite made it. So then when John said Simon Livet's going to be there, I was like, wow, that's quite funny to have him there. But he'll, as I said earlier, his stories will be as valuable as whoever the big name person was in the squad at the time, because he would have been there seeing it also.
Definitely. So, a couple of questions, mate, before we round this up from a couple of mates of mine. Mate mine, Steve, wants to know: do you reckon it's going to be worth a punt on the Ranger player Morelos? I think you pronounce that. Would you reckon that'd be a good punt? Discipline record aside, because obviously Di Canio's record with Rangers wasn't that brilliant either. So
Celtic he was, but
yeah,
he it's a difficult one. We have got interest, however, the Rangers don't particularly, I think, want to sell him, but we have got interest.
But just purely speaking as a West Ham supporter, mate, do you reckon it would be a good thing if we brought him in?
So I don't know enough about him, to be honest with you. I trust Pellegrini's judgment. Pellegrini, if he thinks he's a good player, he's got a decent goals record, albeit in Scotland, but yeah, he's got a decent goals record. I would take him on the assumption that Pellegrini knows what he's doing. Whether we will actually sign him, I can't say at this point because we haven't made a concrete offer for any forward yet. So there's forwards that we are targeting, but we haven't actually submitted one. Neither have we for the midfield position yet either, because we wanted to see how many players we can shift before we knew what our budget was going to be. So at this point, I can't say who is the likely signing because we haven't put an offer in yet.
So do you reckon it's going to be a standard West Ham deadline day of a couple of people coming in at the last knock-ins?
I think we'll get someone before then. I think we'll try and do it before then, but I wouldn't be surprised if like maybe a loan deal or something like that happens on transfer deadline day, yeah.
And just one final, two questions from the same mate of mine who's out in Bangkok.
Right.
Because obviously he's probably still asleep, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
He's got two. There's three questions really, but the two is kind of together. He basically asks, how do you feel that the Pellegrini transition is going, and where would you like to see the club in 2 years when Pellegrini's contract expires?
I think the transition has gone well. I think we were better last season. We played much better football. I think we are attracting better players. The fact that we got Anderson, we got Allaire, we're attracting that sort of next level for now. So I think it's a great signing as well. I think it went well for his first season. Of course, there was mistakes. It wasn't the perfect season. I think we gave up on the cup competitions too easily. I think his selection choices at times were questionable, but for a first season, I think it went well. This season is crucial because he's had more, obviously, another year with them. He's also been able to bring in and change the squad, so it's a lot more to his squad now. And I think what I'd like to see in 3 years is that he gets a new deal, because if he gets a new deal in 3 years' time, that means he's done well. And I think I would like some stability. We've had, for West Ham have always been known to be quite loyal to their managers, but in recent years, obviously we've had Pellegrini, Moyes, Bilic, Allardyce, Grant, Rhoda, all these people like Pardew,
Kirby as well, for that matter.
Yeah, Pardew, Kirby, exactly. So there's all that. There's been a lot in Zola as well. So there's been a lot in in our recent years. So it'd be quite nice to have a manager that is stable. I think that'd be good. So yeah, I think it's been a decent transition so far.
Do you actually just off the back of that, mate? Just thinking about, because obviously up until 6, 7, 8 years ago, well, not even that, but about 5 or 6 years ago, we were well known to have the lowest turnover of managers since the doors opened, basically.
Yeah.
Didn't we have the same amount of managers in 10 years that the club had in about 90?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right, mate. Something like that. And yeah, I mean, I know modern football is very different now to how it used to be. I mean, you can look back and you can see managers that were at clubs for a long time in sort of like the 80s and 70s, 80s and 90s, like Ferguson, and I think Wenger's probably going to be the last of that kind now. But there's a lot of managers that used to just stay for years and years and years, and if you got relegated, it didn't mean you got sacked, where it kind of does now. So yeah, but that has changed West Ham's history, because you're right, there's been so much turnover compared to what it was in the past, and I think it is very hard to build anything, certainly at West Ham's level, if you don't have stability. At Manchester City, it's probably okay to chop and change managers. Not that you need to, so they've got Guardiola, but chop and change managers every 2 or 3 years, because that manager is going to have so much money that they can pretty much do what they want with the squad instantly. Whereas someone like West Ham, where you have got that money but not enough to change it completely, you've got high expectations now. I think to get rid of managers quickly doesn't give you a chance to establish what you want to build. And people like Declan Rice, they like Pellegrini. Who else like Diop? He loves Pellegrini. They will stay because of him. If Pellegrini leaves, and then I don't know, some other manager comes in, we may lose those players as well. So yeah, I'd like to think this is a long-term project.
One final question from the chat. I mean, just before that, Neil's put a very good point and said turnovers normally come about by bad decisions being made in the first place. Can't argue with that, Neil, at all. DJ Blokey has asked a very good question. He asked it earlier, but this is probably a little bit more relevant now. Has it been harder to get information from you since get information to you since Pellegrini came in?
That is a good question. I did write about this in an article, but it's different. It's different to get information. So the trolls love to say that I've got no information since Pellegrini's coming, and they almost celebrate it as a compliment to Pellegrini. And if they want to believe that, and that strengthens Pellegrini's position, then they can believe that. That's fine by me. But the truth of the matter is that the way, in the sense that it's harder, is that the way Pellegrini and Husilios work is that they identify a lot of targets. So they identify about 20 or 30 targets, and they make moves for them without really consulting anyone else. So I don't know Husilios or Pellegrini, so then obviously I can't get it directly from them. So if they go and put an offer in for a player, I won't know unless they tell someone else, and sometimes they put 10 offers in, 15 offers in for different players. It was, but eventually it does filter back to me. You know, like most transfers I've called this window, so it's just slightly different. In the past, most transfers were done by David Sullivan. I'm not saying anything that people don't know here. David Sullivan is much more open with his lines of communication. So whilst they weren't direct to me, it'd be direct to people that I know. So it was easier to get information when Sullivan was predominantly dealing with the transfers. Now,
So you say that, mate, but the Fornells deal was the exception. That cracked me up. That did, because it was on the morning that he signed. Clarence Hugh came out saying that the inside source said we have no intention to buy this player, and then when it broke that he was having his medical, that article was subsequently taken down, and then they were going to say yes, he's having his medical. It cracked me up. It was brilliant.
I didn't know that they'd done that. I mean, the Fornells one was quite an interesting one because what happened with him is that we did actually bid for other midfielders ahead of him. He was like the second or third choice. And so in a sense, Claret and Hume were right that he wasn't the number one target. However, what had happened is obviously the first and the second targets had turned us down or it hadn't happened, and then we'd put in a bid for Fornells. Now, I always knew that Fornells was a target. However, I always didn't think, well, I thought he wasn't one of the top ones. So it did catch people by surprise a little bit because the transfers suddenly broke down the others and then we quickly put in a bid for him. But the reason it was so quick is that they wanted to put that bid in for him before he went to the Euro, well, whatever it was, the tournament that he was playing in the summer. So they wanted to get it done and dusted before he had an impact there. So they sped it through really, really quickly. And then the transfer news sort of filtered through to like the likes of, I guess, myself and other people when it was quite late on into the deal. So there was two reasons, because he wasn't necessarily the first choice, and B, the club really sped it through because they didn't want to try and conclude it whilst he was away. So yeah, it is an interesting one. Like, for example, the Roberto transfer, I was on holiday and I deliberately didn't find out information for that week because it was my wife's 40th birthday present. So I said I was going to take a break from trying to find stuff out. And interestingly, no one seemed to report that transfer. And so that was because it was a Husidios deal. He literally had nothing really to do with Sullivan until it was signed at the last minute. So I guess to answer the question in a nutshell is it's slightly trickier to get information now since Pellegrini and Husidios are in charge because they operate differently, and Husidios is almost in charge of transfers, whereas before it was David Sullivan. Now I can still get the information. It just comes at different points or through different avenues, I guess is the best way to say it. It's harder work now, but you can still get it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, mate. I mean, from my point of view, and for most people that will do various different bits to show their love of the club is, from a supporter's point of view, I absolutely love the fact that nobody knows what's going on until a week or so before something happens. But at the same point, it makes our job and your job, even though this is a complete hobby for the pair of us, and none of us get any money from doing what we're doing. It makes it very difficult to be able to tell people because it's like searching for a needle in the haystack in comparison to how it used to be 2 to 3 seasons ago. But I love it because it's almost like back in the old days of, and I'm really going to show my age here now, mate, is that we used to turn on a teletext or we look at the back of the paper and find out who we signed the day before.
Yeah, it is. It's getting a bit like that. I mean, I'd like to think every transfer I have had some of them I've called like way in advance. Like Allah, I always said he was the second target behind Gomez. Gomez we called. So there are some deals that you can report on as accurately as you did before. However, it's those ones like Fornells or Roberto when they're like slightly I don't know how to describe it, like where they're pretty much all Husilios dealings. If you see what I mean, like Roberto was clearly a Husilios signing. No one's heard of him before. Sullivan wouldn't have heard of him before, but they knew him from his spell at Malaga or somewhere. So it is tricky, and you're right. It's a bit more back to the old school, but the information is still there. You just have to go through different avenues. And the one thing I do say about the difference between myself and most of these transfer ITKs or whatever is that I do this 52 weeks of the year. You know, I do a show every single week where mainly at this time of year, it's obviously transfers, but it's usually the team or it's injuries or contracts or, you know, everything to do with West Ham. I do it 52 weeks a year, 15 minutes of shows, tweets, blah 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 blah, and I think that's the sign. That's the sign of whether someone is getting information or whether if someone is guessing or not. Because if you're just getting transfer, you wouldn't just get transfer information. You would get other information if you knew people, and a lot of these people don't seem to be able to do that. And that, to me, is the way you kind of, what's the word, filter out who's got accurate information and who hasn't.
Well, it's funny you say that, mate, is that because obviously Christmas Day is on a Wednesday. Right. Now, obviously, you guys won't be doing the broadcast that day, will you?
No, I wouldn't have thought so. Not if we want to maintain our marriages. No.
And just one final question before we do wrap this up, mate, because it's been an hour and a half, and it only felt like it's been 20 minutes, to be honest, mate. It's been absolutely brilliant talking with you. But this is the only question that isn't West Ham related.
Go on then.
Don't worry, mate. It's nothing bad. The final question is Darren, who's over in Bangkok. As I said, he's asking questions of everybody. Well, he's trying to get me to ask questions on his behalf. But before I ask the main question, do you eat Thai curry?
I do, yeah.
Right. Okay. Good. Because the last time I've asked this, both people said no, they don't eat it. So, have you? Which is your favourite? Red, green, or yellow?
Green for me, definitely.
I'm more of a red.
If I'm honest with you, I couldn't probably tell you what the difference was, but all I know is that when I go to a Thai restaurant, I order Thai chicken green curry. I don't know why I don't order yellow or red, but I always go for green, and so on that is why I'm going to choose that one.
Do you know what? I would just come off the back of it. I would love some point for the Rib Man to do curry sauce versions of his sauces. God, that would be brilliant.
Oh, mate, I mean, I've got them in the fridge today, and we had fish and chips on today for dinner, and I whipped out what is meant to be the mild version of his sauces, and I love them. I love the taste of them, but I really have to play a tactical game with it. Like, I have to put it on the chip, eat it, let it sink in a bit, then drink some water. I don't know if I'm a complete wuss, but I might just say to him, mate, can you make an X version, which is like the weakened soft version that only fairies can eat. But I'll hold my hands up and admit to being one of them, and I'll have that, please, because the taste of it is brilliant. But I'm not so good with the heat.
Well, X, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, mate. I'm very, very glad we've been able to finally sort this out. I know this is one of the busiest times of the year for you, so I really, really do appreciate it, mate. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
No problem at all, mate. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for giving me the time to answer some of those questions. There's
been some good ones, haven't there? It's been really good.
Yeah, there has, and I appreciate the questions from the listeners. I mean, I can't see the chat, so I'm gonna go on the assumption that everything said there was nice and positive, as I can't see it, so I'm going to leave that. But I appreciate getting the opportunities to speak about what motivates the accounts, because a lot of what is said about the account about me is actually untrue. So it's nice to actually be able to say it as it is. So I appreciate that.
No, you're more than welcome on, mate. And as I say, because one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was exactly that, to get everybody that is watching this is to get the bigger picture of who you are and what you've been doing and everything. So, guys, I'm just going to break the fourth wall for a moment here. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. It's gone over a little bit longer than I planned, but it's not as long as talking to Dave. If you're new around here and you like what the channel, then by all means, please click the subscribe button. As Mike, where are we? Bloody computer freezer just when you need it. Michael Levy Jr. Has been one of the new 4 subscribers to the channel, so thank you very much, Michael. The target for the channel is to get to 900 subscribers by the start of the season, so it's literally two weeks and 2 days. 44% of those that watch these videos are not subscribed, so guys, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get to know when new videos are going up, and also notifications of podcasts as well. So we're now 33 away from that. So guys, it's not that difficult. Just click on the subscribe button. Even if you're watching the replay and you've not aren't aware of the video and this channel before, welcome. As I say, subscribe, and it'd be great to hear from you guys in the replay. Comments as well. If you like the video, then please click the like button, and also please share this content with anybody that you feel may want to watch it. So I'm now going to go off and have my 3rd shower of the day, because if I was going to be here for much longer, I'm going to turn into the Wicked Witch of the West. It's absolutely ridiculous here. It's 10:15, and it's still in the 30 degrees. I'm off. Right, so guys, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you very, very soon.